Hi guys, I'm Tina Knight, and today we're going to be doing a sort of summary video of my understanding of what Bimbofication is. There's a lot of conflicting information online about it. There are like a couple sort of different separate worlds that go under like the term like Bimbo and Bimbofication. And I have kind of been lurking in like these separate worlds and communities for the past like 2 years, and it's been an interest of mine, so I feel like I'm at least semi-qualified to talk about this, but of course I'm still not the ultimate expert. A quick summary of what like a bimbo is. So the word originally started back in like the early 1900s or something like that, as a term that was used to describe a like dumb and like brutish man, and then as time went on it became used to describe like a dumb woman, and like a promiscuous woman, and like for a while it could be used like for both men and women, and then it was kind of just used to describe women in kind of like a derogatory way, and then gradually it transformed into like the stereotypical bimbo that like we think of if you were to like Google the word bimbo, the definition that would come up, you know, with like there's a woman with like blonde hair usually and like big breasts who dresses revealingly and is promiscuous, and usually has like a lot of plastic surgery, and she's like, yeah, super sweet and like kind of dumb. I might have mentioned that. Just very girly. The aesthetic usually involves like a lot of pink. Yeah, so the term was kind of, you know, used to be derogatory towards, you know, very feminine and attractive women, what society at the time thought of as like feminine and attractive women, and like all these traits were kind of associated with that. Even like being unintelligent, that was associated with femininity. So like, yeah, the word bimbo was just kind of used to yeah, be derogatory towards femininity. It's very intertwined with like the blonde stereotype. So if you think of the blonde stereotype, that there's a lot of overlap. Yeah. But of course, since it was just a stereotype, it doesn't mean that like these women that people would think of as bimbos technically, you know, would fall under all the things that I just mentioned. Like a lot of the women that we traditionally think of when we think of a bimbo in like pop culture, like Marilyn Monroe, for example. She's, yeah, kind of like a classic sort of bimbo stereotype, you know, that super sweet and blonde and apple bosom and all that. But in reality, she was actually very intelligent, and like she also was kind of sad as well. She wasn't as like happy as she seemed like on camera. Happy is also one of the characteristics of a bimbo. So like a bimbo isn't a real person, basically. A bimbo is a caricature, an archetype, a stereotype that people might, you know, look at someone and say, oh, that's a bimbo, but like bimbo isn't. Generally, there probably aren't a lot of people who would naturally fall 100% under the bimbo stereotype, or at least that's very rare. But yeah, like that's kind of what happens when you know, classify people that you don't personally know. Like, it's not, you know, people are more dynamic than, you know, a stereotype. But yeah, a good example of this is like Elle Woods from the movie Legally Blonde, where she is very much the stereotypical bimbo, in like pretty much every way you can think of. She is more or less a good embodiment of that archetype, right? But in that story, we see how she, like, it turns out that she's actually very intelligent and capable. Yet she is one of the best examples that we have of a bimbo. Like, there are many examples, but like none of them, you know, are like completely 100% bimbo. Now, because of this stereotype that existed in pop culture for quite some time, it makes sense that a lot of men would fetishize this archetype. You know, like, it already was the beauty standard, but it kind of became this sort of ideal of, like, in some people's minds, what, like, the ideal woman should be, not just, you know, in the way she should look, but also, you know, like, sexually. So she's like the ideal male, like, fantasy. Like, not every guy has the same fantasy, but, you know, in like the general, you know, collective consciousness. So yeah, since the bimbo became this ideal fantasy that didn't really exist in real life, it makes sense that the bimbo would become a big thing in a lot of forms of pornography, about, like, not just stories centering around a bimbo, but specifically about, like, a regular girl transforming into a bimbo. That's also a big thing. Yeah, we see it in, like, all kinds of porn, in, like, hentai, in, like, Western animated porn, in, like, written stories, and also now, like, not this isn't even really new, but, like, yeah, there are also, like, performers and, like, sex workers who will cater to this fetish as well. And of course, for every performer who caters towards this fetish, there will also be, like, hundreds or thousands more like, fictional characters or just porn stars or just stars in, like, mainstream media that people will decide are bimbos, so that they can think of them that way and get off to the idea. Because the thing about a bimbo is, like, it's still very much the beauty standard that is pushed just by our general beauty industry and consumerism and all that stuff. So, like, a lot of the bimbo stereotypes, like, we see them in so many places, just in regular pop culture and in everyday life as well. So it's, like, so easy to find people that you can think of this way. And a related fetish to bimbofication is also the hypnosis fetish. Now, people who have the hypnosis fetish, like, it doesn't always overlap. They don't always like bimbofication and vice versa. But, like, a lot of the time there is overlap. A lot of it has to do with the transformative aspect of this fetish. And also because a bimbo isn't just about looking a certain way. It, as I mentioned before, there are also certain, like, personality traits and characteristics that go along with this. So it makes sense that people would want to include the idea of altering someone's mind in the transformative process of bimbofication. And there are different, they're like two different sides to this kink. I'm using the words kink and fetish interchangeably in this video. They don't technically mean the same thing, but you get it. The two different sides are, there are like people, generally men, who like, they like bimbos, they like, the idea of having sex with bimbos and seeing someone transform into a bimbo. And then the flip side is someone who wants to be the one transforming into a bimbo. And the people with that kink can be from any gender, really. A lot of what you find online is related to people assigned male at birth who want to transform into a bimbo. That's kind of also a related kink to that is like sissy or like sissification. There's the feminizing aspect of that, but it's not completely bimbofication. It's just slightly removed from it. Yeah, so they're like the two different sides of it. So someone who wants to transform into a bimbo, who likes the idea, would often listen to hypnosis, or like what, it doesn't have to be listening, it could be like watching a video with like spirals and like stuff. A lot of it is like kind of placebo effect and like tricks of the mind, but also some of it can actually work. Like, it depends who you ask if it like actually does anything or not. Some of it is like temporary, and some of it theoretically is less temporary. But yeah, like hypnosis, I don't know a lot about it personally, as far as like how well it actually works, but all I know is that it works for some people. And yeah, the fetish side and like the hypnosis side of bimbofication was essentially my introduction to bimbofication. That was how I started learning about it. So yeah, that's just a little tidbit about me that's not really related to learning about bimbofication overall. Of course, even within the kink community around bimbofication, even within that there are differences where people will have differing opinions on what a bimbo is or what would be involved in bimbofication. It essentially comes down to, personal preferences of what they think is like the most attractive and most sexually desirable. Some people have even written like training courses about like how to become a bimbo. Like I've seen at least a couple different sort of training courses. Some more thought out than others. Some, at least one that I can think of, that claims to not even be like related to it being a fetish. I'm not gonna name it, but like, yeah, there's that. There are people who have this kink who kind of claim that it isn't a kink, that it's just their preference, but they still wrote a whole training course and all these like parameters and stuff, and that's the one that's like the most involved, the one that's, it's like a blog that's continuing to be written. But yeah, there are going to be differing opinions even within the kink bimbofication community. A lot of the time, when you see like a video on like YouTube or like a documentary or something of like this person, usually a woman who has like spent all this huge ridiculous amount of money to turn into like, you know, human Barbie or something. There are like a few different videos about this, different people, and stuff like that. Usually when you see videos like that, it's someone who either is personally into this fetish, or they're probably like some form of a sex worker or sugar baby or something like that, who is catering to people who do have this fetish. Like I don't know them personally, so I can't say for sure that all of them do, but like generally, like, yeah, if you see like videos like that, it's related. And one of these women, actually, well, yeah, there are like a few women like this who have like created brands, like clothing brands, centered around Bimbofication as well. There's one in particular that I'm thinking of, again, not going to name names, who, yeah, created a brand, and it's like, was like talking a lot about how like empowering Bimbofication has been for them, and how like it's like a movement. Like I totally get where they're coming from. Like they were feeling very like sexually empowered, and so they, you know, were, yeah, basically saying that Bimbofication is like a movement, and this person is very vocal about this movement and how important it is to them. And like the main focus is around like destigmatizing like bimbos and like hyper feminine, hypersexual, mostly women, and like and destigmatizing like plastic surgery and all this stuff, and like it's all very admirable. There, again, I'm not naming names, but there are like a few takes that they have that I think are a bit out of touch. Like it basically sounds like they think that this Bimbofication movement is kind of on par with like you know, LGBT rights and like Black Lives Matter and stuff. I don't know if they like said Black Lives Matter specifically, but like you get what I'm saying, that they have made it clear that they think that the like the issues that bimbos suffer are more or less equal to the issues that LGBTQ and people of color suffer, and like I think that's a little bit out of touch, but yeah, just thought that was worth mentioning, that like, yeah, their intentions were good, but I think they put like just a little too much stock into like how oppressed bimbos are. And like if they were like speaking up against like sex worker issues specifically, or like any like that's really the main one I can think of, like that's related to bimbos like her, that is like the biggest issue that they face. Like if she were like speaking up about that specifically, and like how people can like actually help sex workers and stuff like that would be one thing. But I haven't like seen her like do a lot of specific activism like that. She just calls it the bimbo movement and gets upset about this next thing that I'm going to be talking about, this other movement that is slightly different. Then during the lockdowns of 2020, when we were all stuck at home and the world started to crumble around us, we got the Gen Z New Age bimbo on TikTok. So a handful of mostly young TikTokers. It started a trend on TikTok of like bimbos and bimbofication. And this is sort of where things start to get a little bit confusing. Well, this is where things definitely got interesting, and they took a big turn from the stuff we've talked about so far. They made bimbofication an aesthetic and a trend, and created a community around it with a focus on being progressive. They're essentially like, hey, I'm taking this misogynistic thing and making it my thing by slapping a new meaning on it. Now, because there are so many different creators on TikTok who are collectively making this community, they don't all say the exact same message. Well, like, there are certain things that they do agree on, that it's like progressive, feminist, pro-choice, pro-LGBTQ, radical leftist, anti-capitalism, things like that, basically. Like, they make that very clear and spell it all out, that those are their views, and while doing so are like acting out this satirized bimbo persona and aesthetic. But yeah, some say that it's about like taking ownership of like the femininity that they had been like demonized for. And some said basically that like it's not about like being dumb or becoming dumb, but just not feeling the need to prove that they are intelligent, or being willing to admit when they don't know things, and basically not wanting to feel like they have to pretend to be super intelligent. Like, most people, like, in society, we when someone brings up a topic that we don't know what they're talking about, we just kind of nod along and like pretend that we understand. But they're just like, no, if I don't understand something, I'm not going to pretend that I understand it. But that doesn't make me dumb, or I'm not going to try to prove my intelligence to you. I don't owe you that. And many have been using bimbofication as like a way to feel more body positive. It definitely has been like more inclusive of different body types, like all body types and genders as well. So it's not exclusively like something related to women as well, just femininity overall. And they were using that femininity to like, feel better about like, their bodies or whatever. And they made it no longer about like so much about plastic surgery. Like, plenty of these bimbos are like completely natural as well, but they've also mentioned as well that it is like plastic positive, that if you want to get plastic surgery, you're not going to be ostracized for it. There are a lot of like conflicting things like that, but like, that's good. They're very inclusive. And yeah, for some it's basically about like satirizing femininity and consumerism and these things that are like pushed on us by society, and they're, instead of rejecting it, they are like amping it up to like a comedic level. That's the idea of it. And for some it's just kind of a form of nihilism, like, fuck it, nothing matters, and there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, so I'm just gonna do what I want, what makes me happy. And like, yeah, it's true that there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, but like, that's also like a cop-out. It's not really, it's not really helpful when it comes to like activism and stuff. But so like yeah, basically, as an actual political movement, the Gen Z bimbo isn't actually very helpful beyond being satire, because there are these like some conflicting things. I mean, I could be wrong, but now all the things that that they do are like completely fine, of course. There's nothing wrong with enjoying the things that you enjoy. And another point that people bring up is, if feminism is about giving women a choice, then inherently that means that in order for there to be a choice, there has to be more than one option. So not every woman is going to choose the traditionally feminist things, right? And you can be a feminist and be progressive while also being hyper-feminine. You can be a feminist and progressive while also making some choices in your life that don't completely align with that, because it makes no sense to be expected to have every single decision in your life, in every area of your life, to be a form of activism. Like, it's okay to, draw the line somewhere. Like, not, the air you breathe doesn't have to be, feminist or, leftist or whatever your ideology is. Like, every single decision you make in your life doesn't have to, perfectly align with that. The air you're breathing isn't, inherently feminist air because you're breathing it. It's just worth pointing out that the way that the Gen Z bimbo does, like, their activism, it can be confusing for some people, like, especially at first glance. Like, if you don't spend enough time watching all their videos to completely get the point, it looks like they are satirizing the ideologies that they're preaching, and obviously that's not the point. Like, that's not their intention. But I think it's worth noting that, it's worth noting the different ways that what you do can be interpreted, especially if you're trying to send a specific message. On the surface, their movement just looks a lot like a bunch of contradictions. Just personally, I think that there are, like, some problems with claiming that Bimbofication is intrinsically tied to the specific morals that those individuals hold. I say those, I hold them as well. But you get what I'm saying, that, like, they're kind of forcing something to, they're like taking this thing and being like, hey, this thing is, leftist because I'm leftist and I said so, when the thing is still something that is very tied to a lot of systems of oppression. And just by saying that, it doesn't automatically untie it from all that. It might be like yanking on it a little bit, but, like, the ties are still there. All it does is make them feel more comfortable using that label, the bimbo label. And, like, I can't fault them for wanting to, like, carve out a space where they could, feel comfortable. Like, we all want to be, like, included. Like, we can't blame them for that. Now, let me make it clear, it's okay to be, like, nihilistic and just be like, fuck it, I just want to do what I want, what makes me happy. And it's okay to take something that you were demonized for and, flipping it on its head and trying to make it, your own. Like, lots of people do that. Like, it's okay to do that. Like, it's okay to want to be hyper feminine. It's okay to not know everything, and it's okay to talk in a way that people perceive as unintelligent. Like, that's fine. And it's okay to do all that while also being a feminist and a radical leftist and to hold all these ideologies. Like, your ideologies don't always have to be reflected in your appearance. Like, you can do both. It's fine. But I do think that there is like a slight issue with like saying that being a bimbo is feminist, to say that being feminine is feminist. It could be for you individually. It could feel like a feminist act to you individually. It could feel like an empowering act to you individually. Just like sex work can be empowering for an individual. It doesn't mean that it inherently is. I think, like sex work, like the things associated with bimbos, they're neutral at best. But I don't think that there's really a way to make them inherently feminist. Like, it doesn't really work like that. You can be a feminist and be a bimbo, but when you try to make them the same thing, it doesn't really work. Now, at this point, I have to admit, I did hop on the bimbo TikTok bandwagon around this time in 2020. At the time, though, I still had it in my mind that it was about a fetish. That it was still related to the kink in my mind. And like, if you know me from that era in my TikToks, you know that like that kind of is what the focus of the videos I made was. And the fact that I was still thinking of it that way is an example of part of why this is a problem of these people calling their movement Bimbofication on TikTok. I'll get into it. Because there are so many young people on TikTok, teenagers, a lot of teenagers, they'll come across this trend and they'll see, like, you know, the cute aesthetic and the cute clothes and then for good measure, the ideologies that a lot of them agree with, and they're going to be like, well, fuck yeah, sign me up. And then before you know it, they are dressing like a bimbo and calling themselves a bimbo and all this stuff. And maybe they're not even aware of the whole other world of bimbofication that I mentioned before, but those people are still out there, and so that's going to attract these men who have that fetish, and some of them, not all, hopefully, but probably not zero, might not care that these teenagers might not be 18 yet. And even if they are 18, like, chances are they're not really going to know what it is they're getting themselves into. Now, let me remind you that one of the aspects of the bimbofication fetish, some of it is edge play, hard kinks, aka potentially dangerous. Now, I said that hypnosis, like, you know, some people don't think it works, you know, whatever, but the idea behind it is like yeah, you can't be put under hypnosis against your will, but once you do let your guard down and let yourself get hypnotized, you can be influenced to do things that you wouldn't have chosen to do or wanted to do otherwise. Like, you become vulnerable, and people take advantage of this. Now, That doesn't mean that hypnosis is like across the board always bad. So long as you know what it is you're being exposed to, or you trust the person who is doing this to you. Well, like, as long as they are trustworthy, then, you know, it's fine. Like, edge play, hard kinks, they, you know, there's nothing wrong with them, but they come with risks, is what I'm saying. So, in summary, I think that Bimbofication probably should be left as a fetish. 'Cause I think when you try to make it political, it gets confusing, and like the messages get muddled a little bit. And of course, they're calling it something that is also the same thing as a kink, that is like a misogynistic kink. Now, like, I say misogynistic, like, affectionately when it comes to kinks. You know, I have a lot of misogynistic kinks. Like, you know, a lot of, like, you know, feminists have misogynistic kinks, and a lot of, like, you know, I don't know what the right word would be, but like, no matter what your ideologies are, like, a lot of the time in the bedroom, you have kinks that are like the opposite of whatever that is, in like a weird, twisted way. So, like, you get what I'm saying. Like, I think that they made a mistake calling their little movement Bimbofication. A lot of them have, you know, built their fame on that now, so there's not really much they can do about it. They can't really back out of it at this point, but that's just my opinion. It's kind of like making furries a political movement, you know? Like, you know, people are not really going to take you seriously, and, like, you know, maybe that's kind of the point, that, you know, because they're not taking you seriously, you know, you let your guard down, and then might be more open to hearing what they have to say without realizing. But still, furries aren't always a fetish. Maybe that wasn't the best example, but you get what I'm saying. Like, when I say furry, I know it probably pops in your head. So, like, you get what I'm saying. It makes things very confusing. But yeah, in summary, you can be a bimbo and a feminist. I just, don't think they should be made to be the same thing. It's kind of forcing things that don't really flow that way, in my opinion. But yeah, that's my summary of Bimbofication, with some opinions thrown in there as well as some of my own experience a little bit. If you enjoyed this video, made it to the end, wow, okay, cool, awesome, glad you're here. Like the video and subscribe, and have a good day.